Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Around the World in Films, where I pick a country and pick a movie from that country and we try to experience the country through the movie. Why do I do this? Because I think films are educative and they can help us experience the world around us. Today we are going to Australia and we are doing that through the film Charlie's Country. It does not show Australia the way we see in the food and travel shows and on TV, but the film highlights the life of the Aboriginal Australian community, the challenges they face, and the issues of assimilation of the Aboriginal community with the mainstream Australian community. So, Charlie's Country is the story of a 60-year-old Aboriginal Australian man called Charlie who is frustrated with the ways of the Australian white community and the bureaucracy and the way he is being forced to live according to their rules. Because this film highlights the Aboriginal community, I thought it would be more useful to highlight certain aspects of Australian history so that it all falls into context. So the Aboriginal community in Australia has been in existence for more than 50,000 years, and it's often said that they are one of the longest surviving Aboriginal traditions anywhere in the world. And that remained so until the 17th century when a Dutchman landed in Australia, and further down the line Thomas Cook from Britain set foot in Australia and he found the land suitable for colonization by Great Britain, and that's when Britain set up a colony in the southeastern part of Australia. So Britain set it up as a penal colony, which means the convicts and prisoners in the prisons in Britain, because of lack of space, were transported to Australia and kept as prisoners in Australia. And after some time, they were released based on their good behavior as a reward. And these ex-convicts and the prisoners were the initial colonial population of Australia, and that's when the white settlement began. And gradually, the white settlement began to expand, and as they expanded, they came into contact with the Australian Aborigines. This proved to be very negative for the Australian Aboriginal community. Their population was depleted for two reasons. The major reason was, as they came into contact with the white population, the Aboriginal community was not immune to diseases like smallpox, and when smallpox spread into the Aboriginal community, they lost a lot of lives, and it is claimed that more than 50 to 60% of the population of the Aboriginal community was claimed by diseases like smallpox, to which they were not immune. And the second aspect is that they came into direct conflict with the white population, and because of the advanced weaponry that the white population had, the Aboriginal community lost a lot of lives in that, and the population of Aboriginal community decreased rapidly. And later, the white government of Australia became more sensitive. They understood it was of course the land of the Aboriginal Australians, and they have just settled into it. So it is not right to be confrontational, and so they started a system of assimilation. But again, this was not so good, because the concept was not here to accommodate the Australian Aboriginal culture, but rather to assimilate or take over the culture and make them come to the waves of the white Australian population. So they did this through picking out children from the Australian Aboriginal homes and forcibly putting them into Australian Christian churches and convents, and forcing them into a way of Australian white life. So this is called as the stolen generation in Australia. But however, going forward, the government became more sensitive. Towards 1970s and 80s, it became more sensitive and more accommodative of the Aboriginal Australian culture. So we see in the movie that the Australian government has allotted certain houses and a township and a space for the Australian Aboriginal community to live, and they're also allotted a ration. But the problem with this is that the Aboriginal community is used to their own way of life. Now, if you want them to throw away their culture and adapt to a different culture, that's very difficult for them, and that's why they start feeling alienated in their own land. So, Australia is their own land, but still, because of being forced to assimilate into the mainstream Australian white culture, they feel very alienated. And another thing is that the Aboriginals are used to their tribal way of life where they hunt and gather for food, and they have very traditional skills in terms of homemaking and stuff. These are not very useful in the modern economy where you're supposed to work in a factory or a white collar job. They do not have these skills, and especially the elderly generation of the Aboriginal community, they face a lot of difficulty with assimilation. They play a losing game. They do not earn enough money from the modern economy of Australia, and hence they are forced to survive on little or low quality food. They are stripped of a life of dignity. Of course, when you don't have enough money and you are not living in a great place, you are forced of dignity. So on their own land, the Aboriginals are stripped of their own dignity. So this is what frustrates Charlie. And one day, with too much frustration of not getting good food and being forced to live in the bureaucratic system of the white community, Charlie calls up his friend and they go on a wild buffalo hunting into the forest. So for once they want to have good food, a scrumptious food. So they go to the forest to hunt a wild buffalo. And as they return with the wild buffalo with their cats tied to their jeep, the Australian forest officials stop them and confiscate both the wild buffalo and their gun because they neither had a shooting gun license nor did they have permission to hunt in the forest. And later Charlie makes his own weapon out of wood. It's a wooden spear, and even that is confiscated by the police officials. They say that you're not entitled to own, you do not have the right to own weapons. So this completely frustrates Charlie. He is neither able to survive or live a good life in the modern economy or the modern culture of Australia. He's frustrated and decides to go into the forest and live like the olden days, just live by nature, hunt and gather food and just take food whatever you need for that day and live a life of nature. So he goes deep into the forest, and then of course later he has to return for other reasons. That's the journey of the film, which you can watch. So my two favorite aspects of the movie are these. The first is there's a scene when Charlie goes into the deep forest and tries to live by nature. He hunts a barramundi fish and cooks it for himself. So this barramundi fish is indigenous to the northern Australia where the film is set in. It is found in the coastal water and also the lakes there. So he hunts this barramundi fish and he cooks it on a flame of fire. It's a beautiful scene to watch, and Charlie himself is very happy in that scene that he is going to have good food after a long time. As he cooks the fish and eats it, he sings and talks to the fish. That's a wonderful scene which you must watch. The second aspect of the film that I love is the character of Charlie, and I think that is something that we can learn from the tribals and the Aboriginal culture. It's that, and especially that's accentuated in Charlie's attitude. Despite all the disadvantages, everything is stacked against him. The whole system, the judiciary, the police, the culture, the economy, everything is against him on his own land. And despite that, he does not give up hope and keeps living, and even his interactions with the bureaucracy or the police or the forest officials, he is sort of a jovial manner. He takes life as it comes. And there's also the interaction between Charlie and his friend Pete Black, who's also another Aboriginal Australian who is a childhood friend, and it's they who go to hunting together. So just these interactions with Charlie and the way he interacts with other people, it's really nice and wonderful to watch. So, but there's something else that I recently discovered. This 60-year-old Charlie, who's played by David Gulpilil in this film, also played the teenager in a 1971 film called Walkabout. He plays an Aboriginal teenager in the 1971 film Walkabout, which is also set in Australia. So that is another eccentric, wonderful, memorable film to watch if you want to know a little bit more about the Australian outback and the Aboriginal culture. The Walkabout film contrasts the Western civilization and the Aboriginal way of life. It's a beautiful film. So there, two white Australian kids get lost in the outback, and they are helped by an Aboriginal teenager who's played by the same person 40 years ago, David Goodblitt, who plays Charlie in Charlie's Country. He plays the Aboriginal teenager in that film. So he guides these two Australian white kids to safety when they are lost in the outback. So that's another film. So if you're interested, do watch it. It's called Walkabout. So that was our trip to Australia today through the film Charlie's Country. Next time I'll meet you with another country and another movie. Until then, you can check out the other films and countries in the playlist. Goodbye and thanks for watching.